Hello and welcome back to The Hatch. I'm Sammy Roth.
And I'm Rosie Murphy, and this is the podcast where we talk about Lost.
This week we've got Season 3, Episode 4. It's Every Man for Himself. It is a Sawyer flashback.
We've got a lot going on with the others, and with Jack, and with a certain pacemaker that is put into Sawyer's body, but also not.
Yes, a certain bunny that is dead, but also not. And in addition to that, we've got a conversation this week with Stephen Brandon. He is the director of Lost the Musical, which is a Lost parody show that is currently playing in Los Angeles, which I was lucky enough to see a couple of weeks ago. And he's going to tell us about how he made that show.
Let's go.
As always, on The Hatch, we start with our hot takes about the week's episode. Rosie, what is your hot take about Every Man for Himself?
So I have a fun one, nothing too serious this week, which is probably the reason this stood out to me so much is that the last 3 episodes have been so heavy and have had no levity in them whatsoever, it seems. And we get a really fun and pleasant moment in Every Man for Himself when on the beach, Desmond is getting these kind of deja vu sensations, but realizing he can see slightly into the future, and he knows there's going to be a storm, and so he wants to build a lightning rod so that Claire's tent won't be destroyed and she won't be put in danger. And he borrows a golf club from Paolo and rigs up this lightning rod, and Hurley walks up and he says,
"Is that art?"
And it just made me laugh, and it was nice to have a moment of oh, right, sort of normal life is continuing.
Yes, normal life is defined by Desmond seeing the future and building a lightning rod, but...
Right, but normal within the context of beach society, which is kind of just passing the time.
My hot take is also about a laugh line, but a different one. I was worried for a second there that we had the same thing we were going to pull out, but not this week. I just really loved when Sawyer rigs up the contraption that he's going to try to use to electrify whichever other comes to get him next. And he says, and he looks real proud of himself, and he says, "Bet the bears never figured that out." And what I just love about that, in addition to it being hilarious, is that to just understand that 3 episodes later, Sawyer is still stinging about Tom saying to him it only took the bears 2 hours.
Yeah.
That Sawyer's got a thick skin, but that one really got him, and he still feels it.
Right.
And he's so proud that he figured out something the bears didn't. Anyway, I enjoyed that immensely. So, hot takes. By the way, I should mention, since we sometimes bring up notes from our listeners here, we got a comment about a point that we had talked about last week about being confused where Locke learned to make this hallucinogenic drug that he used to give himself a spirit quest of some kind. Someone pointed out that he did do something similar with Boone in Season 1 in the episode Hearts and Minds, where he sent Boone on a little bit of a drug-induced vision. So it wasn't... The point of the comment, which I think is well taken, is that it wasn't quite as out of left field as we might have made it out to be in our discussion.
I had entirely forgotten about that.
Anyway, but on to Every Man for Himself, I suppose. What did you think about this episode? So
the thing that stands out most to me is just how cruel and brutal the others are during this episode. I know it ends up, the central tension of the episode ends up not being true. They didn't actually put a pacemaker in Sawyer, et cetera, but there's that scene where Ben comes in and just beats the living shit out of Sawyer.
Yeah, that was really vicious and surprising.
Right, and a few scenes later, Danny comes in and beats the shit out of Sawyer, which makes, I guess, a degree more sense, because there's a sense of, your people killed my wife and the person I love, and now I'm going to take my vengeance. I'm going to kill this person and make Kate suffer the pain. That whole plot line of the reaction to Colleen dying kind of felt like it ought to be an overreaction. I understand that this woman's been killed, but the others don't exactly live an easy life out here. Goodwin's been killed.
That's true.
It just seems like they ought to be a little more comfortable with death, especially considering how easily violent they seem to be toward our losties.
Yeah, in the flashback, in the previously on Lost for this week, one of the segments they show is Colleen right before Sun shoots her saying, "We're not your enemies, but if you shoot me, that's what we will be." Mm-hmm. And that's just so patently false. I mean, they took Walt from the raft.
Right.
And they blew up the raft and left everyone for dead. So I don't know, it kind of seems like there's a pretty, good understanding here that these are two sides that are essentially at war with each other, going back to Ethan.
Right, and Ben keeps saying, we're not killers. We're not what you think we are, and yet the others have a long, well-documented track record of not just sort of shady activity, but outright violence.
Yeah, and I definitely, you go back to Ben saying in the finale last year, we're the good guys, Michael, and I think this episode continues to show that we have no reason to believe that to be the case.
Oh, no, zero.
Yeah. I will say that I think Danny Pickett, his reaction is, if drastic, understandable. Like,
sure.
he lost someone.
Sure.
And I don't know that when Ben is beating up Sawyer, he's necessarily reacting to Colleen being shot. I think he's working on his own deranged plan here with Sawyer. Doesn't diminish the violence, but
right.
I don't know that I would quite call that an overreaction to Colleen's death, because I don't know that it had anything to do with that.
I think that's separate.
And it's not like they haven't dealt with death before, because as we know, the pregnant women keep dying.
Right. Which is, again, it's different. It's not being killed, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems... I was shocked watching this episode at just how dark and violent it gets.
Yeah. I think the thing with the pacemaker, the scene where it's so cruel that they make Sawyer think they've done this.
Right. Well, and the scene where they're supposedly installing it is really intense, too. Mm-hmm. Sawyer's awake, and it's those two dudes taking care of him who clearly don't know what they're doing. And they make him bite down on that stick while they give him this injection, and yeesh.
Yeah. At the risk of being a little bit of a broken record, I continue to think watching this that overall this storyline doesn't make a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. Like Ben saying to Sawyer at the end that we did the thing with the pacemaker, his explanation is...
we did all this because the only way to gain a con man's respect is to con him.
And that's his explanation for why they did the pacemaker thing, rather than just show Sawyer that he literally couldn't escape. That's pretty bizarre, and...
Right, and they're definitely playing up the romantic tension between him and Kate.
Right, which seemingly is also part of Ben's plot.
Right.
But I just think that, compared to last week, certainly, that despite the fact that this is all pretty contrived, I think it does produce some really awesome moments, this episode.
Yeah.
There was a lot to like here. I thought Sawyer and Kate both really shined this week, actually.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I'm thinking with Kate, for instance, of the scene where she refuses to escape without Sawyer and quotes back, "Live together, die alone" at him. Even the moment where Pickett is beating up Sawyer and it's kind of then yelling at Kate, "Do you love him? Do you love him?" It's kind of ridiculous, but Evangeline Lilly sells it, and she says she does, and then we get the great moment between them later where she tells him, "No, I was just doing that so they would stop hitting you."
Right. Which actually is pretty funny and seems to be true, right?
I think so. Because
it would have been a perfect moment to just make it a confessional, and she stands by it. She says, "No, I didn't mean that. It was just a small lie to get this man to stop beating the shit out of you."
And by the way, I had to pause and rewind to make sure that this really happened, because it goes by so quick. But Sawyer has this amazing eye roll when she says that.
Yeah.
And he kind of turns his head away so that you can't see him rolling his eyes, but it's there for a split second.
Right, which is really funny because Sawyer, of course, wants to believe that it's true, but also doesn't want it to be true, and would never admit the complexity of that to himself.
No, totally. The whole dynamic between them, even though the plot contraptions to get there are contrived, it's pretty compelling. And I think that, I think with Sawyer, it's really, even though the pacemaker thing is ridiculous, to see how he acts after it's put in and when they threaten Kate with the same treatment, I just think it's so rare to see Sawyer look and act as defeated as he does here. and so down and so dark. Like, it's not a Sawyer we get to see very often, and to see that he's in that state because he's worried about what's going to happen to Kate, like, I find that pretty interesting. I think Josh Holloway does a good job with it too.
I agree. And Ben calls him out for that, and rightfully so, and says, you didn't particularly care when we told you we'd put this into you, but when we threatened her, that changed your behavior, which I think pegs Sawyer very nicely, right? I would guess that if the pacemaker had been in Sawyer alone, he would have pushed things much closer to the limit.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And just said, maybe it's not real. Fuck it. I'm going to try to break out, and whatever happens, happens. And if, my heart explodes or whatever, so be it. But
yep, no, definitely. Yeah. He only takes it as seriously as he does because he's worried that Kate's going to be affected too.
Well, of course, this being a Sawyer episode, we do also get a flashback to Sawyer's time in prison.
I was sort of complaining last week that I thought that Locke's flashback felt like it was out of nowhere, but I liked this one a lot just because it seemed like you're saying, like, this is something that totally fits into everything we know about Sawyer.
Right.
Like, Sawyer was in prison. Yep. Sawyer was doing cons in prison. Yep.
And there's a fun twist at the end. And this one you find out, he's supposedly helping this fellow inmate kind of fight the power and fight the man and protect his conned fortune. And in fact, he's working with the warden, again, purely out of self-interest to get his sentence commuted. But the writers do such a nice job of keeping that a secret until the end.
So I'm not sure that I agree, because I think they actually tip us off intentionally to that at the beginning of the flashback.
Where?
It's very quick, but there's a moment where one of the other inmates, the one who Sawyer's talking to as they walk downstairs and see the dude who stole the money getting beaten up, the other inmate he's talking to looks up and sees the warden watching and says to Sawyer, "There's your friend, the warden." Mm-hmm. And maybe if you haven't seen this episode before, which we both have, you don't pick up on that. But I read that as I thought a hint that that we were supposed to be in on the fact that everything coming was a con. There's your friend. I guess he could have been sarcastic, but maybe not.
Yeah, I read that as sarcastic.
Interesting.
Despite knowing the outcome, I thought the friend was just saying like, "Oh, there's your friend, the warden." That guy who hates you.
That's interesting. Maybe this is too much hindsight. Watching with hindsight, looking for clues where there aren't any.
Yeah,
I did love that this is where we find out about Clementine.
Me too.
Which, unlike I'm thinking of other things like reveals that happen way too late. Like what Kate did came very late, mm-hmm. and late. We still haven't found out. Later this season, we get the flashback where Locke uses the use of his legs, which is amazing that hasn't come up yet.
Right.
But to me, this felt like very well timed. Like, I don't know what it was exactly, but it just felt like this was the way to continue telling Sawyer's story. Like, it's not something we've been waiting for. We haven't been waiting for word about his daughter.
Right.
But it feels like something that adds to. I mean, the moment where he agrees where he says that the money that he gets mm-hmm. on this commission should go to Clementine and that she shouldn't know it's from him, like, that feels like it just adds a really wonderful new layer to Sawyer that we didn't, have from him before.
Right, and it fits so nicely with everything else that's happening in this episode in terms of he cares about this person very much, but they can't possibly know that he cares about them. Mm-hmm. Because that would be, I don't know, too embarrassing, or that would compromise him somehow. I think that's exactly what's happening here with Kate.
What do you mean?
Like the sum of the pacemaker plot, for all its flaws, is that he cares about Kate enough to sort of sacrifice his own freedom, and he can't tell her, of course, because they've threatened him and, they've not allowed him to tell her, but I don't know that he would tell her anyway.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, no, I think those are very much in parallel.
Yeah, you're right, because, if he were to tell her, I could see her reaction being, without the threats to her. If you were to just tell her, I have this pacemaker in me, I think Kate's response would have been, that sucks, but, I can get us out of these cages, and let's just go slow and keep your heart rate down.
Right. He's wearing the watch, and he calms himself down, or tries to, but it seems mostly, and I'm super reading into this because we don't get very much evidence, but I think he's mostly trying to calm himself down so Kate will stop asking. Well, and Kate even says this, right? She says, they did something to you and I don't know what it was, but the fact that you're lying about it is what makes me really nervous.
Right.
And I think that's also what makes us, the viewers, nervous in this episode, is that Sawyer doesn't give two shits about the fact that this thing is in him in and of itself. I mean, he does, but he would be willing, he's risked more.
Right. I mean, I think in a sort of ironic way, maybe what we learn here in an episode where Kate falsely confesses her love for Sawyer is we learn that he really loves her.
Yeah, I agree.
And, when you think about her being scared by him not, lying to her for some reason, I mean, if she knew, that's certainly something that would scare her. The depth of Sawyer's feeling and caring.
Exactly. Yeah, just as much, if not more, than the fact of the pacemaker.
Yeah.
Which is not in the end fact, but, whatever.
This is what I mean. The pacemaker is like a stupid plot device,
right.
But it accomplishes like some really cool stuff in terms of what we get to see with it.
Right. Right. And although I am definitely starting to understand why folks say that this part of season 3 is, one of the weakest parts of the show and stuff, like the Sawyer Kate plotline is really excellent. And I'm enjoying it.
It is. It is. I will say I also enjoyed the Jack Juliet stuff this episode.
I did too. It was nice to see Jack kind of back in his element. Like goes to treat a patient and just immediately springs into action.
Yeah. And not only back in his element, but also like I think pretty successfully manipulating Juliet.
Yeah.
Like I don't think she brings him to participate in the surgery against Ben's orders unless he's, ribbing her earlier in the episode about, who do you really take orders from? Yeah,
that's true. And there's that really nice ironic moment when immediately after he says that, Ben comes in and says, and gives her an order.
Yes. And she has to follow it.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing that she says, like, that's not how we make decisions here. Like, come on, does anyone really think
nonsense.
That Ben's not just in charge? Like, there's no way she even believes that herself.
No. And I don't know if she's saying it because she needs to present a certain image to Jack, or if she, is in some kind of denial herself. But obviously, Ben's in charge.
It's interesting to see that. I guess I was knowing what Jack does later with Ben in the surgery. It's a little surprising, perhaps, to see here that he doesn't seem to have any hesitation. He's going to go. He's going to try to save Colleen. Like, this is what he does. He's a doctor.
Right.
Like, I really respected him for doing that. I thought that, he was sort of the, bigger person in this scenario, and I certainly wouldn't have blamed him if he'd gone in and either refused or tried to use this as leverage somehow. Like, I feel like that would have been totally within his rights, considering the whole, like, kidnapping and imprisonment thing.
Yeah. No, I think that's a fair read, but I would counter with Jack lives in this sort of very black and white universe, or seems to, and in that universe, like, he doesn't know this woman. She's not harmed him. He doesn't know how she got shot. He certainly doesn't know that it was Sun and Jin and Saeed that fired the bullet. She's just a woman with a gunshot wound, and he's the only person equipped. Whereas Ben, he has history with. And not only does he have personal history, but he knows that he's the leader of... He is basically the person who's imprisoned him. And
this is true.
Sawyer and Kate being the leader of the others. I think that's probably the division in Jack's mind. Like, Colleen here is still innocent, whatever that means. And Ben very much is not.
Yeah, that's very fair. I still think Jack would have been within his rights to take another route, but you're right, this is Jack, so it's hard to expect that.
Yeah. I mean, Jack...
What it makes me think of is the moment in season 4 when Jack is finally so fed up with Locke that he, attempts to shoot Locke in the head, except that the gun is out of bullets.
Oh, yeah.
Which arguably is justified by that point, because Locke has blown up the submarine and threw a knife through Naomi's chest and done all of these violent and murderous things to prevent them from leaving the island. So when you look at what Locke had done at that point and what Ben has done up to this point, like, yeah, those seem like pretty clear examples where Jack has a strong case to violate his Hippocratic oath.
Right.
Yeah, Jack and Kate and Sawyer all comport themselves well this episode. Like, strong episode for our 3 lead characters.
Right. Right. Weak episode for the others, I guess.
Yeah. Although Ben quoting Of Mice and Men back at Sawyer is also hilarious.
It's very satisfying.
Ben gets some comedy points for that.
Yeah. In his Ben way.
What the hell are you talking about? It's from Of Mice and Men. Don't you read?
So, this week we have an interview that is a bit of a departure from our usual focus on cast and crew. Sammy had the chance to talk with Stephen Brandon, who created Lost the Musical, after actually seeing the musical. I think this interview will make a lot more sense if you could just kind of explain what the musical was, what it was about, what it contained, and just kind of set that up.
Yeah, so Lost the Musical, I got a chance to see this a couple of weeks ago. It's playing right now and playing through September the 23rd on Monday nights at the Whitefire Theater in Sherman Oaks here in Los Angeles. Basically, this guy Stephen Brandon and a writing partner of his, they a while back. This is actually the second run it's having. It ran back in 2014 as well. They created a Lost parody musical that condenses the entirety of the 6 seasons of the show into 2 hours.
Amazing.
And it is infused with musical numbers set to well-known songs like, Uptown Funk and
there's American Pie and Defying
American
Gravity.
Pie and Bohemian Rhapsody and all sorts of stuff, TNT, and it's really funny. They're doing it at a small theater in Sherman Oaks. It was a packed house the night I was there. It seems like they're getting good crowds for it. Charlie, the actor who plays Charlie, Dominic Monaghan, was actually there the week after I was, so it was kind of a shame to miss him. But it's a really funny show, and I got a couple complaints about it, which you'll hear me bring up with Stephen. But overall, highly recommend for any Lost fan who is in or near Los Angeles and has the ability to come see it in the next couple of weeks.
Cool. Thank you for that exposition. Let's go ahead and play the interview.
I'm here with Stephen Brandon, director of Lost the Musical. Stephen, thanks very much for being with us on The Hatch.
You're welcome, and namaste.
Namaste to you as well. So tell me, take me back to the beginning. Tell me how this got started, the origins of Lost the Musical.
It's early 2014, and one of my good friends, Stephen Christopher Parker, who is an actor, said to me, "We love Lost so much, why don't we write a parody musical?" And, I'd moved to LA from Australia in 2008 to become a writer. I'd had some mild success writing on sitcoms, and we just, we'd watched Lost together. We'd loved it so much, and we, started a Kickstarter campaign to try and raise some funds. We ended up raising $8,150, 815, right on the nose.
Congratulations, that's fun.
And that got us enough of a base to rent a theater in Hollywood, and we actually debuted on September 22 in 2014. It was the 10-year anniversary of when the pilot aired and the flight took off from Sydney, and we had a 1-month run in the Lillian Theatre in Santa Monica Boulevard, and we love Lost. We did all 6 seasons in about 3 hours. We decided there's so much to go through. Why don't we just, instead of doing original songs, we'll do what Weird Al Yankovic does. We'll take songs you already know and love, and we'll adapt them for Lost. That's the parody element right there. And we mainly stuck to the island story, and we kind of get all the flashes out of the way in the opening number. So now everyone's backstory in the opening song, which it's American Pie, but we call it, instead of Bye Bye Miss American Pie, it's Bye Bye Oceanic 815. From down under, went asunder, when we dropped from the sky.
Yes, it was very funny.
And then it was about a week and a half into the run, Jorge Garcia came to see the show. We had some connections, and
so you knew he was going to be there when he showed up.
In 2014, well, we knew he might come because we knew we had some connections. An opening night, we had a publicist. We had Sam Anderson Bernard. We had MC Gainey. We had Kimberly Joseph, who played Cindy, the air hostess. They came to see the show. MC Gainey had a great time. He loved it.
We've talked to MC for the podcast. He's extremely fun.
Oh, I listened to it. He's a great guy. And Jorge ended up being on the Kevin and Bean radio show and was talking about the musical. And then I went on Kevin and Bean and plugged it. And then we were sold out after that, because this was in 2014. The show had only been off the air a couple of years. And so it was still very popular. And after Lost the Musical my partner and I, we ended up doing Shame of Thrones, the musical, which was another parody, this time of Game of Thrones. And we did that in 2017, and we ended up off-Broadway. We took that to New York. And the final season of Game of Thrones was airing this year, and the Whitefire Theatre in Sherman Oaks reached out to us. They do weekly shows, so they can have up to 7 shows a week, and they were looking to build up their Monday audiences, so we decided to do musical Mondays. So we brought back Shame of Thrones in time for the final season of the TV show, and then when that season ended, we went straight in and remounted Lost the musical to coincide with the 15-year anniversary. We have a show coming up on September 22nd on the Sunday night, which coincides with the 15th anniversary of the pilot. And this time we cut it down a little bit because we thought the 3-hour length was a bit too long last time.
Right, so you got it down to 2 hours, and you're not doing alternate endings anymore.
No, yes. Originally we had alternate endings where the audience could vote because, there was that controversial ending. This time we've just stuck to the island storyline. We had a Michael Jackson song originally, and he's not really in flavor right now.
Yes.
So we took out Thriller, which was Monster. It was describing the smoke monster, and we replaced it with Uptown Funk, which I think has been a big success so far.
I thought Uptown Funk was one of the highlights of the show. Actually, I'm turning to my program here. It's Island Funk, as you've reimagined it.
Yes, basically it's from when they find out that Ethan was not on the plane and that he's not on the manifest, going from Ethan taking Claire to Claire giving birth, to Boone falling out of the tree, and Jack kind of killing Boone, well, not saving him. All of that is encapsulated in this 4.5-minute Island Funk number with choreography, with singing, and with dancing. It is quite the spectacle.
Yeah, you just sort of are getting at this here, but one of the things that was sort of most fun and impressive to me was how you chopped up the plot in such a way that it felt like you really did do the 6 seasons without leaving out any of the major threads. Like, putting together the birth of Aaron and Charlie getting kidnapped and Boone dying and making that one musical number, like, it worked surprisingly well just like on a dramatic level.
Well, I think, the TV show did it right. They had life and death in the same kind of moment, or we call them scenes in our show. But things flow nicely into each other. There's a lot of exposition. We have a lot of, living in the 1970s, season 5, Sawyer goes back, he becomes LaFleur. That's a good 6 episodes of the TV show, but we managed to wrap it all up into one expository song, which was I Am the Very Model of a Modern Major General from Pirates of Penzance, but we do it, I Am the Very Model of a Dharma Barracks Employee. That's our number.
Yes. Can you talk about just, how you made decisions about what to include and what not to include? Because, I just thought it was interesting. Like, Richard Alpert, for instance, doesn't appear in the play, which is not a complaint at all. But, Martin Keamy, also a wonderful character, but more minor, gets his own hilarious song. So I guess I'm just, could you talk through what the process was of figuring out how you were actually going to get the plot into 2 hours?
I think the highlight, people remember certain things. Obviously the hardcore fans know everything, but then the casual viewers, we all remember Charlie dies, he drowns. There was a freighter and the freighter blew up. So we had to hit all those key points that people remember that also move the plot. In the original version, Richard Alpert did appear. He was part of the Thriller song. He sang the Vincent Price number and he explained the island. But he was one of the characters we lost when we cut it down. We had Zoe originally, but we cut her out because people don't even necessarily remember who Zoe was in the final season.
I do, but I wish I didn't.
Well, exactly,
so that's fine.
Exactly. Martin Keamy, with the whole he's got the bomb on his vest, and that's a big point about how Michael comes back and he's blowing on the bomb on the freighter, and that used to actually be 3 scenes, and again I turned that into one song, which was TNT. It's Dynamite because it fit perfectly. So that's why Martin Keamy gets a song where other people don't, just because it's very relevant plot information that has to come across. Originally we did have a Jacob tap dance number. Hooray for it was Hooray for Candidates. It was Hooray for Hollywood. But it's what you're really in the weeds when you have to try and explain Jacob at the Man in Black. We do our Jacob a special way. You saw it. I don't want to spoil it, but there is a big reveal about our Jacob in this show.
Yes. But I won't spoil it. But it's one of the better gags, and I love, for instance, and this is in the preview that you have online, so I don't think it's too big a spoiler, but really enjoyed that instead of shooting the polar bear, Sawyer boxes with it.
Yes.
I also loved how you handled Nikki and Paulo, which maybe you don't want me to spoil, but they show up in sort of an unexpected spot.
Yes, Nikki and Paolo appear and disappear just as quickly as they did in the show, in our show as well, in a surprising way. And it's great when, you see someone you don't know who they are necessarily, then you say their name and you realize, oh, that's Nikki and Paolo. We have a similar Dr. Arts cameo in the show.
Yeah, so I mean, with the jokes and the gags, I mean, you're obviously, you love Lost, but you're also making fun of it. I mean, I'm hoping you could just like speak to that in a way in terms of just like, how and where you're having fun at Lost's expense, even though it's clearly this is a production that's made for people who still love the thing. Yes, well, people have, Lost was built to be one of those water cooler shows where people talk about it and dissect it, and this was before internet, if Lost was on during memes, how many memes would we have? There are memes now, but this is taking all those Lost kind of moments and just making them a little bit funnier. And I think the cast and crew knew what was funny. I mean, the thing about Nikki and Paolo was Damon and Carlton have always said that was a response to the audience saying, what about these other people in the background? They listened to the audience. Turns out it was a mistake. The audience hated them straight away, and so then they listened to the audience again and killed them. So, we're just making fun of that by bringing them on and killing them 3 seconds later. All these, the convolutedness of it, the fact that we didn't necessarily get all the answers, the fact that it is confusing, they knew that going in, and we've just, poked a little fun at that. But we still tried to, honor the original storyline, go through it in a natural way. When I was writing the show, I did a rewatch, but I rewatched the show chronologically. There's that group online that recut the whole series of Lost in chronological order. Have you heard? No, I actually didn't know that.
Oh, go! I think it's called chronologicallylost.com. Don't hold me to it, but type in chronologically lost and you can download some group or organization or just person, I'm not sure, has recut the entire show. The very first episode is the Man in Black and Alice and Janney, then the second episode is Richard Alpert, then it does all the flashbacks, then once you hit the island, it just goes in order. So, because we weren't doing anything with the flashbacks or the flash forwards, the flash sideways, I was able to tell the story kind of just in order from the island's perspective, and that really helped me watching that.
That's nifty. Was it, I guess this is maybe a silly question, but was it hard? I mean, you're a big Lost fan. Did this come easy to you and to the other Steven, or was this like a grueling process of figuring out, what worked, what was funny, what to do with it?
It came pretty easy because we were still in it at the time. We'd been doing rewatches, and when you love something so much, it just kind of comes naturally. Looking at it again 5 years later, I haven't rewatched the show in 5 years, and I didn't want to when Stephen and I took another pass at the script this time, we didn't watch it because I wanted to come from the point of view of the audience member who probably hasn't seen it in 5 years. So there are certain things we've forgotten. A lot I've had to go back and do research on, just about the Dharma Initiative and the rules of the island, sort of things like that you kind of forget that I had to go at it again. But once we picked, we do have a lot of classic songs. Don't Stop Believing is in there, Bohemian Rhapsody, basically all the flash forward stuff. Once they get off the island, we just nail that in the 6.5 minutes that is Bohemian Rhapsody. Once we knew what we wanted to do, the songs kind of came pretty easily. I really enjoy writing parody lyrics and trying to rhyme things like that. So it came pretty easy off the bat. I think the problem was we wanted to include so much back in the day because we were so passionate. That's why the musical was so long. Having stepped away from it for so long, I was able to just kind of refine it to, just the real necessary beats going forward.
And I will say I did enjoy that. I mean, there were stuff that you just kind of slipped in real quick. Like, as I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's a moment where maybe the stage is changing or a scene is ending and you just have the actor playing Jack, like, suddenly floating across the stage with a big haggard beard holding up a sign that says LAX.
Well, that was how we ended the first act.
Yes.
Because, we have Act 1 is seasons 1 to 3, and Act 2 is seasons 4 to 6. And we all know at the end of season 3, Naomi dies and they get the stat phone working, and then that was the famous flash forward episode. So that's why we just had Jack come on in a beard automatically saying, we have to go back, Kate,
Yes.
we have to go back, and that ends the first act.
It was just fun because, I mean, you don't have to do a lot with it, but every fan gets the joke.
Yes, and I've had a lot of people come to the show, like friends of actors who haven't seen the show, and they still get a kick out of it, and now they want to go back and rewatch it. Actually, some friends came on opening night. The show is weekly, so we're running 12 weeks. They came on opening night. They'd never seen Lost. They're in the middle of season 2 now. They're planning on watching the whole thing before they come, and they're going to watch the last show, and then they'll get all of the jokes again, even more, because they will have understood. So, you know, you're welcome Hulu, you're welcome ABC Studios, because more people are rewatching and having seen our show now.
That's so interesting. I can't imagine wanting to see it if I hadn't seen Lost, because there'd be spoilers, but, you know, to each their own. I'm also curious about the actors. Are they all big Lost fans?
This time around, not as much. We have 4 cast members who were in the original show who came back. We invited some of the others, but they were just unavailable. So we held new auditions. And I would say half of the cast, which is about 7 or 8 people, had not... most people said, I watched season 1, or I stopped at season 2, or I gave up when they started time traveling. There weren't, you know, a lot of people who'd seen it all. But the cast, likewise, during the rehearsal period, the cast have been watching it again and becoming more familiar with it. And suddenly they're telling me after 7 weeks of rehearsal, oh, I get that joke now.
I have to tell you, I have only one complaint about your show, and I hope you'll put up with me telling you that. But I was not a fan of the running, what I thought was your running joke about Kate, where it seemed like she was just kind of whiny and asking other people what to do the whole time.
I hear you. I hear you. I got to tell you, I'm not happy with it either.
Really?
Well, you know, that was not in the original script. That came through Jasper, who plays Kate, realized that when we cut down the script, there wasn't a lot for Kate to do. We hadn't written her strong enough. You know, when you're looking at just the island story and not a lot of the flashbacks, Kate is always there and she's always along for the ride and she's one of the boys. But you know, we have the big closing number, which is Man of Science versus Man of Faith. It's our Defying Gravity parody, and it's Locke versus Jack. So, you know, there's a lot of, I hate to say it, but it's a bit of a boys' club. So
that's true.
We didn't have that much for Kate to do. So as the process of the rehearsal was going along, I think Jasper realized that, so she started playing her kind of like Velma or Daphne from Scooby-Doo, like being part of the gang, but kind of just being like, what do we do now? Where do we go? And just asking all these random expository questions. I mean, that's our bad writing, but she's turned it into something funny. You, as a purist, love Kate and want more to do with Kate, and we did have more with Kate in the original show. But like I said, we had to cut a lot of stuff for time, just because it didn't necessarily it moved the character's plot forward, but it didn't move the actual plot forward. So
I appreciate your owning up to that. Well, and Jasper is funny, and she does a good job with it. But not how I would have.
She's making the most of it, but unfortunately, with so many characters, and we're turning 119 hours into 2, Kate got a little short shrift.
And you did let her shoot the man in black at the end, which I was satisfied by. I know we've talked about the song somewhat already, but I mean, do you have any favorites there, or was there anything that you were able to do with the music that you're particularly proud of?
I'm a big musical theater guy, so the fact that we got the Chicago song, We Both Reach for the Gun, in there. That, when Michael shoots Ana Lucia and Libby, we have a 2-part song. We call it, it's when Sawyer stole the guns, and then it becomes when Ben shot me in the arm. That's a fan favorite, and I really enjoy that we were able to, again, cover all of that in song. Like we've talked about already, the Uptown Funk number, it just peps the audience up. It just gets people going. It's such a good song. And, you know, of course, the Dharma Barracks employee, the lyrics to that song is such a mouthful. And Eric Fagundes, who plays Sawyer, he's such a champion that he was able to get so much gobbledygook about the Dharma Initiative into one song. I was, you know, I'm proud that I managed to write it and that he managed to fit it all in, and he gets it out every night. It's, you know, let me just read you something here.
Please.
I'm not going to attempt to sing it because I'm not a singer. I'm sure this is a shock for you. We really don't know how or why. Whatever happened, happened, and it's happening to us right now. My name here now is Jim LaFleur, head of all security. I am the very model of a dumb barracks employee. The fact that all that kind of just managed to fit in, I don't want to pat myself on the back too much, but I really enjoy that.
You made Lost a 2-hour musical, man. You can pat yourself on the back as much as you want. I'm good.
Thank you.
I didn't know the Chicago song, unfortunately. I'm not a big musical theater person, but I do love Wicked, and I think I was impressed with your Defying Gravity number, how much of the lyrics you were just able to use verbatim, and that worked in Lost.
Well, the fact that I only had to change 75% of those words. The rest kind of fit in nicely, and it's nice when you hear the words you already know. One of our second number is Dude, Where Are We?, which is part of your world from The Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
Dominic Monaghan actually came to the show last week. I had sort of put out some feelers to him and every other cast member on Facebook. I've been hitting up Damon and Carlton, hoping they would come and see the show. But I was just in line selling tickets, and then there's Dominic. 10 minutes before the show starts. And he was really gracious and stuck around and took photos with all the cast, and he really enjoyed himself. And he told me that almost made him cry. He was tearing up. Wow. He was tearing up at that number. I think he was having just memories and flashbacks, but just the whole cast singing in harmony. Dude, where are we? That was his favorite number.
And definitely, if you guys are listeners to The Hatch, if you want to look at those photos, we retweeted them on our own Twitter at The Hatch Podcast, and I think they're on the at Lost the Musical Twitter as well.
Yes, and we have a whole photo gallery at lostparody.com. Like I said, Jorge Garcia came to see it in the original production. Rebecca Mader also came back in the day. So check out all the photo galleries at lostparody.com to see all your favorite Losties hanging out with their musical counterparts.
So you guys are, you started on July 15th this year at the Whitefire Theater. You're going every Monday night through September 23rd, right?
Yes, and we also have the bonus Sunday night show on September 22nd, the 15th anniversary of Lost.
Yes. Okay, so you've got a couple more. Everyone, if you're in Los Angeles, you should definitely go see this show. It's really fun for Lost fans. Stephen, anything else that you're working on just outside of this that you want people to know about?
Oh, well, if you like parody musicals, the next show coming up is a musical episode of Seinfeld influenced by Dear Evan Hansen, and it's called Dear Jerry Seinfeld. And that opens up in October at the 3 Clubs. And we may be doing some more Shame of Thrones in the future. I don't know what the future holds, but you can always find me on Twitter. Find me on Twitter at StephenB29 or Instagram at StephenB29B, and you'll find out whatever other shows and things I'm doing here in Los Angeles.
Stephen, thanks very much for being with us on the Hatch Podcast. We really appreciate it.
You're most welcome. I'm enjoying listening every week as I go back and watch episodes myself.
What was your favorite musical number?
Ooh, I really loved the Uptown Funk number. I also really enjoyed Martin Keamy's rendition of TNT, just because I enjoyed that one that Keamy got a song, and two that they made a whole thing out of him having these, bombs, this heart rate trigger strapped to his person that was rigged to the ship, and he's just like strutting around the stage with an open shirt and these like fake muscles strapped onto him because it was the actor who was playing Jin who was also doing Keamy. So they strapped these plastic muscular looking things onto his chest to make him Keamy, and just seeing him kind of like chew up the scenery and run around, laughing about how he's going to blow everything up was really funny. Because Keamy's kind of a psychopath.
Right. That's kind of on brand for that character.
It is.
Well, sounds like quite a show.
Yeah, and those actors, they worked hard up there. It's local theater. They're all bouncing around, changing costumes constantly. You can tell that they're having a good time doing it and that they want to be there. So I would recommend it.
Cool. Well, if you happen to be in the Los Angeles area, it's playing for about 3 more weeks. Check it out.
Yeah. We'll be back next week with The Cost of Living, which is the, of course, iconic final episode for our beloved Mr. Echo.
In the meantime, as always, you can find us on Twitter at The Hatch Podcast and on Facebook.com/The Hatch Podcast. If you are watching the show along with us and would like to leave us your hot take, we are at 9546 Dharma.
You can also leave us a rating and or review on your podcast app, whether that's Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this, please review the show. It's helpful for us, and we appreciate it.
Our theme music is by Andy G. Cohen, and our cover art is by Danny Roth.
And we will be back next week.
Namaste.